So, welcome to the web lecture series on technical training. This is Dr.K.N.Sivabalan, and in today's lecture, we'll be learning about how to configure a servlet using web.xml. Unless and until a server is configured, it cannot have any sort of communication with either the HTML or any kind of resources in a Java-based web project. So first thing what we are going to do is we are going to create a project. Say for example, I create and go to new, I go to dynamic web project. I just name it as project 2. Okay, project 2. And I just point out my target machine. That means I point out my web server where my servlet is going to run. So my servlet is going to run on version 8.5 of Tomcat. So I have selected this, then I go to next and see here. Again I press next here. So you can see here you generate web.xml deployment descriptor. So this is called as a configuration file. So using this file we are going to configure the servlet. Now I just check it out, then finish. Okay, now in the left side I have project 2. And you can see here in web content in web.inf you can see web.xml. So this file is called as a configuration file. Now first I want to create a HTML file. So to create a HTML file, just select this project 2 icon, right click it, go to new, then click HTML file. So I just name the file as home.html. Okay. So inside this I create a h1 tag, so welcome to HTML file. Okay. Now to establish any sort of communication with the servlet, all you need is actually you should create a form tag, and this form tag have a set of controls or bunch of controls where it can transfer the data to the servlet. So I'm going to create a form tag. In form tag I create a method post. You can even use get method, but post is comparatively better than get method. I'm using post method, and I give action equal to, say for example I give the action called send data. Okay, so you can give any string here, and this string in the action tag is going to be the means for communication for connecting with the servlet. Now when I press a submit button, actually this send data control string is going to be pasted in the address bar. Okay, so using this send data, we are going to perform various actions to connect with the servlet, and whatever actions we want to perform in the servlet, you can do that. So now I just use input type equal to submit. So this is to create a submit button, and I just give the label of the submit button as submit itself. So now my form has only one element called a submit button. So as soon as I press the submit button, so I should transfer the control to servlet. Okay, now we will try to verify whether it is running properly or not. I will save this file. Now to run it, I just click it, and it is Tomcat 8.5 version 1. Of course, this is the server which we have configured in the previous lesson. Now I go and click finish. So if it is asking for restart the server, yes, okay, click OK. That means every time if you restart the server, the buffer will get clear. Now, yes, the job is done. So welcome to HTML file. Now you can see here my address bar actually consists of home.html. Now when I press submit, there is a change in the address bar. You can see here send data. So whatever the string I am giving in the action tag is actually appended in the address bar. But I'm getting an error called as HTTP status 404. That means it is not able to find the servlet. Okay, because we have not created the servlet. So now how to create the servlet? Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a Java class file, and then I'm going to convert that as a servlet. So I'm just going to project 2. Okay, click it, go and just click class. Okay, in Java class you have the packages project 2, and I'm going to give the name called as message servlet. So MSG servlet, this is the name of the servlet. Okay, so now I'm going to finish it off. Now I got a class file called as message servlet.java. This is simply a class file. Okay, now I want to make this as a servlet. So use import java x dot servlet dot start. Okay, now if I include this package, then I can use a class called a generic servlet. So servlet can be created with the help of two classes. Either you can use a generic servlet or HTTP servlet. But if you want to use generic servlet and you are supposed to use this package called a java x dot servlet dot start. Java x means it's called a Java extended. Now a message servlet is a simple Java class file. I want to make this as a servlet. So to do that, I am simply using extends generic servlet. Okay, now this is one way, and if you want to make it as a HTTP servlet also, you can do that. So message servlet, now you are getting an error that it has to implement a service method. Yes, obviously we will implement a service method. Now I go to public void create service method, and this service method should have two parameters. One belongs to the interface called a servlet request, another is called a servlet response. So I create servlet request, okay, and I create an object, reference object for that. Say for example req is called as for request, and servlet response, yes, okay. But by default, whenever you want to run a servlet, by default it has to handle some exceptions, and that exception is called a servlet exception. So throws servlet exception, okay. And since I am going to use an input output function, I will also handle IO exception here. Okay, now you will get an error for IO exception, not a big deal. So simply use import to overcome that error. You can use import java.io.start. Okay, so now I'm going to use a class called as print writer class. So print writer, so that means if I want to print anything in the servlet, okay, using the servlet, then I have to use this method called as this class called as print writer. So use out, okay, and use the response object here. So what is the response object here? The response object is called as res, okay, res dot get writer. Okay, so this actually takes up the properties of the writer, and actually it gives to out here. So now I want to write the content. Out dot println. So simply use out as this object which we have created here, and use println. So I want to give the message called as soon as the button in the HTML is pressed, I should give the message called as welcome to servlet programming. Servlet programming. So use h1. That's it. Okay, now we will verify whether it is working or not. So, but the beauty of this method called a service method is all the actions which pertains to the servlet actually is done in this method called a service method. But this service method is actually part of the generic servlet class. Okay, but one more thing important to the service method is either you send a get request or post request. Service method handles both the request here. So irrespective of what kind of request is sent by the client, it actually handles all the requests which is sent by the client. So that is the nature of service method. So as soon as if you press the button, it comes to this service method, and then you will get this message called as welcome to servlet. Okay, so I am going to run this, but the job is not complete now, so we will run it and verify whether it is running properly or not. So I'm going to home.html, click next, and then finish it off. Now I want to press this button. When I press this button, I should get welcome to servlet programming. But I'm not getting it. So what is wrong here? That means now see here, a servlet is written in a separate fashion and HTML is separate, but both existing in the same project. But there is not any connectivity between the servlet and the HTML file. So how to establish the communication or connectivity between the HTML and servlet? So in that place, you have to bring web.xml. So in web.xml is used to establish the communication between the HTML and servlet. That means you have to configure the servlet. Now web.xml. So I don't want all these stuffs. I just take all the stuffs. Okay. Now you need two types of tags to configure a servlet. So first is called as servlet. Create a servlet tag, and the next one is called as servlet mapping. Okay, so these two tags is mandatory to configure the servlet. Now in the servlet tag, you need two different tags. One is called as servlet name, and the next is called as servlet class. Okay, and similarly, when you come to servlet mapping, here also you need servlet name, and the next is not servlet class, it is called as URL pattern. Okay, now servlet name in the servlet tag as well as in servlet mapping tag should be identical. So say for example, you can give any name here. I give a name called as XYZ. I give a name called as XYZ. So same name I have to give it here also. So I give XYZ. Okay. Now what is the servlet class which I want to connect here? So my servlet class is actually, it is called as message servlet.java. But what you have to do is you have to see what is the package name it belongs. So it belongs to a package name called as project2. And the name of the servlet is called as message servlet. So while you configure in web.xml, you have to write the complete, fully qualified name. Okay, so simply you cannot write message servlet because message servlet actually belongs to project 2. So I go here in web.xml and I give the package name project 2. Then I give message servlet. Okay, I have given it. Now when you can connect this message servlet, as soon as you get a send data, okay, as soon as you get send data in the address bar, then you have to connect to the corresponding servlet. So how to configure the send data? So that this is the place where this is the content where you have to put in the tag called as URL pattern. So go to web.xml. So in web.xml, there is a tag called as URL pattern. In URL pattern, so I have to configure for send data, action send data. So simply I put / and send data. That's all. Okay. So if I do this, automatically as soon as when the address bar is getting the value called as send data, immediately the control will be transferred to message servlet. And in message servlet, you have a method called a service method. So automatically it gets executed. Now we will run this and ensure whether it is working properly. So I run it. Okay, I just submitted. See here, yes, of course. So as soon as I get the send data string in address bar, it actually transfers the control to the servlet and it goes to the service method. I get the value called as welcome to servlet programming. But there is also another way to create a servlet. Now I want to create a servlet which is specific to HTTP. Okay, so instead of using generic servlet, I am using HTTP servlet now. HTTP servlet. Okay, but this HTTP servlet does not belong to the package called a servlet.star. So to include that, then I have to use import javax.servlet.star. http.start. Okay, so this package is specific to HTTP. So in this package HTTP, you have the class called as HTTP servlet. So as soon as message servlet extends the class called as HTTP servlet, it automatically becomes a servlet. Now this service method is also part of HTTP servlet because it actually inherits generic servlet, but HTTP servlet also have a specific methods called as do get and do post. Now, since I am actually sending the request called as post request, I should actually write a post method. Okay, so if you send a post request, it is handled by do post method, and if you send a get request, it will be handled by do get method. So I go to the message servlet. I am going to write a do post method here. So public void do post, and here so far we have written HTTP servlet request. Okay, but here it is HTTP specific, so you have to write it as HTTP servlet request. So simply use req and HTTP servlet response, res. Okay, I create two object references and throws. So I copy the same content here because I am going to use the same concept here also. Okay, so have an exception. Okay, now what happens is I don't want this contents in service method, and I should go to do post method. So as soon as I pass a method called as send a request called as post method, so immediately it goes to do post method here. So only I have changed the method, so I don't want this service method because this method has become obsolete, so I just delete this method. Now see here, I am using a HTTP servlet instead of a generic servlet, and since I am actually sending a post request, I have to handle the post request with the help of do post method. So I have written this method, and this instead of servlet request I have to write HTTP request because you are using a specific servlet which is pertains to HTTP. So I save this file. I will ensure whether you are getting the same output. Run this, next, and finish it. Okay, so welcome to HTML. So when I press it, now on IMAN, welcome to servlet programming. Now you are actually getting the output from do post method. Okay, so that's it about configuring the servlet. Thank you and Jai Hind. Bye.